This presentation, I'm just going to walk through some sections of it a little quicker. I see a lot of familiar faces that have probably seen pieces of this presentation, or maybe this presentation in its entirety before. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Medsphere.org history, and then I'm going to walk through the software releases that are currently available, just so people have a flavor for what's out there. I'm not going to do too deep a dive on the technical side. I will put in a brief plug at the end for a more technical-oriented presentation tomorrow. So Medsphere.org, we launched in 2007. It was mostly a static site where you could download some of the software that we provided, core clinicals and some other things of that nature. There wasn't really any interactivity to it, and in 2008, we took what we had at that point from a release standpoint and redeveloped the site as a far more interactive community site, attempting to provide more of a software forge and an area where people could work on the software together, discuss the software, document the software, etc. So you can see some of the tools that we have there. We used to do a series of community calls. I think we've moved to more of a quarterly schedule for that. We have done work groups in the past, and occasionally they start up again, and we announce those things on Medsphere.org. And I tend to try to put them out on Hard Hats and the other VistA lists that I'm aware of. And if there's other lists that people think it's appropriate and would like me to announce them to, please let me know. Feel free, and I'm happy to do that. We also now host open development projects on Launchpad.net, so there's some connectivity between Medsphere.org and Launchpad.net in terms of where the source code repositories are, as well as the public bug trackers. So normally I do a little tour of the page, and I'll just go there very quickly so you can see. There's the home page. There's a lot of information here. We've tried to organize it in a way that people can see the activity as well as get started. I think the key things that I would point out for those that want to take a look at the site is make sure you look at the search bar up here. This does search all the content on the site, and it does a pretty good job of narrowing in. So if you've got a question that you want to ask, go ahead and do a quick search for it. See if it's already been answered. If not, go ahead and post a question in the forums section. So I'm going to move on then. This was a bit of analysis we did for fun. We looked at year-to-date 2010 in April. So this is a little out of date, and we tried to pull down some geo information about folks. Obviously, from an anonymous standpoint by IP address, we looked at where people had been accessing the site, logging in, and downloading. And so this is kind of what we saw in the U.S. Quite a bit of downloads here on the East Coast, and the little houses represent users that were logged in. And then we also now have open package repositories for the projects like GT.M, where you can do an apt-get or a yum install on your Linux installation, and those little boxes represent the repo uses. And then if you look at Europe, you can see there's some more activity over there. So we do see, when we look at the global stats, there is obviously a significant amount of activity in the US, but we do see a global reach, which is nice to see. A lot of downloads there. We get significant questions from Asia and elsewhere. So what do we end up releasing? As I mentioned before, our core clinicals, which we refer to as OpenVista Server and OpenVista CIS, as well as our development platforms and frameworks. And then we've also released some ancillary tools, which I'll just hit at the very end of the presentation, some testing tools and some other things that might be of use to some, and we've seen them picked up outside of this project as well. So the code is released as tarballs, as we refer to in the tech world. We put those up on SourceForge.net, as well as Launchpad if they have a download available there. And then, of course, we have the open repositories that I mentioned. So you can go both routes. If you want to just download a snapshot, or if you want to take a look at the development trunk, you can do that through Launchpad. And all those are linked within the project homepages. On the very front of the homepage, you can get to the Launchpad site as well as the trunk of the source code. We piloted with Boscar's patients, actually, a GT.M integration project headed up by John Tai, one of our developers. a year and a half ago or so, and had some pretty good success there, and have started to move some other projects in that direction as well, meaning that the trackers are public, all the source code is public, the main source code repository is all public as well, and so that's all available on Launchpad and medsphere.org. Our licensure philosophy, I got a question at lunch about licensure, what license we use. Don't want to go too deep into the muck of licensing, but this is kind of our philosophy. We selected the AGPL and the LGPL. We tend to use LGPL for foundational or technology type of releases, and AGPL for end user or applications that would be accessed across the network for obvious reasons if you're familiar with the AGPL, and we tend to think that those are good licenses for our purposes. This is a bunch of boxes with different colors in them and some labels. Probably not very readable from where you're at. What I'm trying to depict there is some of the differentiation we have at the different layers of the stack in terms of licensure. I'll put this presentation up. You guys can take a look at it and ask me questions about it when you can actually see it. I like to put this one up. Fred's not here, but Fred was not a fan of ours for a long time, and we just continued to do what we felt was the right thing, and eventually feel like we've come to agreement in terms of our philosophy and his, and he had some nice things to say about us publicly. And then we've also... I know, I skipped that slide entirely. It's hidden. I'll let you guys Google for that. This was maybe a year ago. Black Duck, which is a company that basically scours open source projects of all types, and they have some practice around IP protection and open source policies within companies. They offer services around that, but as a part of their knowledge base, they have all of these projects, and so they kind of dug into the healthcare side of open source, and they looked at all of the projects, and they found the top 10, of which VistA was one of them, and then we were happy to see that they found that the OpenVista project was quite active and one of the most active among the projects that they looked at. So I'm going to dive in now to the individual projects. I'm going to try to go quickly on these because most of the stuff you guys can read. OpenVista Server is the main core product. This is the product that we use within our customer sites as well. For those of you that missed earlier, we implement hospitals of various sizes and specialties, and the product that is available right now in open source is actually a little bit ahead of what our hospitals are running from a service pack release standpoint. Sometimes it's a little behind, just depends on where we are in the leveling process, but this is what we would consider the very core of the system. Again, the applications in this case we license as AGPL, and the foundation is LGPL. That was based on a request from actually the VistA Expertise Network, who wanted to use some of our FileMan enhancements and didn't want to necessarily have to deal with the AGPL license. And you can see it's now in an open repository and has had a significant number of downloads since it was originally released. As I mentioned, substantially similar to customer sites, sustainable in the sense that the patches are available publicly as well. So you, just like the VA, you could download a starter database that's up to date, or you could have an existing database that you then take the patch stream, which is documented, and you can take the individual patches and install them on your own system. Kevin Toppenberg's not here yet. I remember him posting a while back about a Midland Memorial newspaper article that talked about the work they had done with OpenVista, and he said publicly on a list somewhere, you know, boy, if only that was available in open source. And I was pounding my fists on my desk. It is available in open source. So that all of the work that we do within the OpenVista Server product is available, including all the stuff that happened at Midland. Okay, OpenVista CIS. This is a C# re-engineering project around the CPRS product. It was primarily written using GTK, which is a cross-platform toolkit. So it allows us to run on multiple platforms, Windows, Linux primarily, and Mac OS. We have run it on Mac OS, but it's not one of our target platforms. So this was released. You can see the licenses. There's a number of licenses in there because we have some libraries that we use, and there is a sort of a plugin environment there, and the plugin edge, if you will, is LGPL, so that people can create plugins as they wish. And then we also incorporated some LGPL code like the spell check. There's an inline spell checker, and some of the imaging tools are GPL. Again, open repository, significant number of downloads. As I mentioned, it's cross-platform. It is A11Y. There is the acronym or the abbreviation for accessibility. It's also internationalizable and localized, or localizable. There are some partial translations for it available on launchpad.net and in the release. It does have integrated imaging support, and I'll show you some screenshots here. As I mentioned, Mac is not one of our target platforms, so it's not one that we test against, but we have run it against the Mac platform. So I'll just run through these. This should look very familiar to those of you that have seen CPRS. We basically took the CPRS product and tried to mimic as much of the user interface of it as we could, with some minor enhancements to usability. We wanted to bring in a little bit of some of the modern user interface theory, but at the same time we understand and know just from the adoption stats at the VA that they've done an excellent job in their user interface design, and so we didn't want to lose any of that. So it should look very familiar. Growth charts with vitals. This is running on Ubuntu. Here's a window running on Windows with the integrated imaging. Here's some translation. Probably can't see that, but you've got French menus and tabs up above, and you've got Russian tabs below. Simplified Chinese. We get questions quite a bit about, well, does it run this language? Does it run that language? And so we end up trying to test these things, and I try to keep a little archive of the screenshots. Here it's running right to left support. You can see the nice thing about the GTK toolkit is that it automatically reorients the screen based on a soft setting. So based on the localized settings of the operating system, it can actually change the way that it places the buttons and the orientation of the text to fit that language. Sort of reminder resolution. This looks like it's on Linux. Here's running on the Mac. So this one I wanted to stop at. So we recently were approached by a college in Canada that wanted to integrate radiology viewing into the platform. They basically set off on a 4-month project to take OpenDICOM.net, which is a C# reference implementation of the DICOM standard, and implement a viewer as a plugin to CIS, which you can see here is a screenshot they provided to us. They're using this in a research and educational facility around, specifically around simulation of critical care. So we just recently saw this. In fact, this is one of those cases where someone just pops up and emails with this sort of work, and we didn't even know what was going on at the time. So kind of interesting. Okay, the OpenVista Appliance. This is basically a roll-up of all of the various products into one virtual machine that you could download and run very easily. The licenses obviously vary by the various projects, but it's all FOSS, runs on GT.M. Had significant number of downloads to date, and we just released the 6th release of it actually last night, which includes the latest version of the products from the various projects. So there's the projects that it includes. We actually added FMQL, which is not one of our projects, but one that I don't think Connor's here yet, but one that Connor Dowling will be talking about. I'll plug his presentation a little later, as well as the FM projection project and some others that I'll be talking about. And there's a screenshot of it. It's kind of our old marketing. We used to have a yoga-themed marketing thing. We went from revolution to yoga. If anyone that remembers Medsphere back in the day, we had a big fist, and now we have yoga. I'm not responsible for marketing. So this is one that I wanted to hit on. We view OVID as a key technology platform for development, and one that can be used as a foundational technology for developers that want to develop on top of OpenVista or other Vista derivatives, using it as a platform. It is Java-based. There is some M components to it to hook into Vista. We recently released a white paper. You can see the URL there, available on medsphere.com, that talks about some of the values of OVID and some of the ways that different developers have used it. And I have to plug Bhaskar because he graciously provided us with a forward for that white paper. Thank you, Bhaskar. I think I'll go into the technical capabilities. I don't want to dive too deep into it because I know we don't want to go too technical, but here's some of the things that you can do with OVID. Again, it's a developer tool. This is not something that you would sit down and just start using as an end user. It's something that you'd use as a developer. We've seen traditional applications built. We've seen web and mobile applications built. We've seen some integration, some automation. There's a lot of different uses for it. It's really a Swiss Army knife from a tooling perspective. It allows us to call from within MUMPS out into Java and do things in the Java world and bring that data back in, and the opposite is true as well. We can, from the outside world, call into OpenVista, treat it as an interface, if you will, an API, and bring that data back out. And it supports creating of Java domain objects, which if you come to the technical presentation tomorrow, we'll go into more detail on. But if you think of domain objects as what you would consider a normal object, you'd have a patient object or a medication object, and there are certain attributes around that object that you can operate against. There's a reference domain that you can then operate and build software against, and I'll show you here what some people have done with that. So as a platform, with George Lilly's help and the CCD-CCR team, CCR-CCD team, I know we want to say CCR first. We assisted with some web services around a gateway. We were also working with the DoD on a decision support system that's using OVID against multiple backends, including RPMS. We use it internally for our own application development as a communication method. We had a developer up in Silicon Valley put together an iPhone app. We include that screenshot here because it looks cool. And if you actually want to see a demo of that iPhone app running, there is a little video on medsphere.org. I would add that the developer released the RESTful web service interface that he used to build the application, but he hasn't released the actual iPhone app yet. It's not clear. He's talked about the fact that he wants to, but it's not clear if he's going to or not. So we're hoping that he's interested in doing that. He may decide not to. We'll see. There was a registration application built on top of OVID that was piloted for a bit. I believe that that pilot has gone away. When we released it, we built a sample front end to it. This is a web-based front end using the OpenLaslo web toolkit. Essentially, this is, if those of you that are familiar with the VistA product within the VA, there is a care management application. This is using a lot of the care management APIs to build up the lists of patients and get the data on the patients and whatnot. And we basically just retooled it as a web app very quickly within a matter of a couple weeks. And then the last thing is you can extend all these domains and objects as web services. And there's your gratuitous screenshot of a WSDL. Not very useful, but at least you know there is a, I would mention there is a creating web services with OVID tutorial on medsphere.org, so if you wanted to see how that actually worked, you can do that online. So when to consider OVID? So VistA provides a strong integrated solution. We all know that. The problem is it's a double-edged sword. The integration can cause other problems. You have very tightly knit together data, logic, and presentation tiers. And one of the problems that we face as a community, that the VA faces, and you see them in various modes trying to get out of, is how to adapt to a changing world around them. And we see OVID as one of those possibilities. You can use it, as I've illustrated today, as an extension of the platform, to integrate with other systems, to orchestrate between various systems, as well as migratory. And I'm going to talk a lot more in depth with Andy Pardue, who's one of the original developers on the project, tomorrow at the Extending the Platform talk. I hope this time is still right, Nancy. I think it's supposed to be 9 a.m. And we're going to go through a demo of OVID. We're going to show you some of the work that we did with the DoD to build and pull out CCDs. And we're going to stuff that into another system to show some interoperability. And we're also going to talk about some of the other ways that you might consider using OVID in a development project. In January, we released FM Projection, which is a SQL projection technology. It basically takes the fileman data structures, and using the VA's SQLi package, it converts those into representations that an SQL server understands, and you can query against using SQL. It is a read-only data source, so it's probably good for reporting and some other those sorts of things. Not at this time. It doesn't write back to the database, and there's various reasons that the folks here that are very familiar with the technical details would tell you why that might be a problem. Probably wouldn't, it's probably not a direction we'll necessarily take it, but we do see it as valuable from a reporting standpoint and a way to look at the data in different ways. It does use MySQL as its SQL infrastructure. So the idea is that we built a SQL, what they call storage engine, that is FileMan aware. It talks to FileMan over the network, and all of the SQL parsing, processing, optimizing, etc. is handled by MySQL, which most people recognize as a fairly good querying tool. And then you can extend that beyond to use ODBC, JDBC, and other tools to get at the data. And this will be part of the Extending the Platform talk tomorrow. The second half, I will actually demo some queries as well as an open source reporting tool reporting against it. This was just released in January, so this I think everyone here is aware of open source software, sort of no warranties and whatnot. This is not one that we even support in our commercial stack yet. This is definitely on the open source side, so buyer beware. Talked a little bit about the architecture and the capabilities, and I think the nice thing is you're able to hook up off-the-shelf reporting tools, and it is M implementation agnostic, so we'll run against a cache implementation or a GT.M implementation. And this is very similar for those of you that are familiar with Cache's product. They use, they call FM2 Cache, basically allows a very similar sort of thing, but obviously cache only. I mentioned the GT.M integration project. This is one that is now fairly mature in its release cycle. We're now using this in production with our own customers. And it basically, we took OpenVista and GT.M, and we figured out where the pieces were that needed to meet together. If you consider running VistA on top of cache, for example, there's a lot of hooks within VistA to control at the cache level the way that it opens sockets and controls ports and all those sorts of things. And within GT.M, you had to do that in a slightly different way. What we wanted to do was take that to the next level and really give you the control. So somebody that's familiar with running VistA on top of cache, when they do this on top of GT.M, there's much less training required. They're just working in the normal menus that they would expect, setting up HL7 interfaces and RPC brokers, and all that happens as you'd expect natively within VistA itself. Again, this is an open project, started in late 2008. All of the code's on launchpad.net. All of the bug tracking is done there, as well as the project repository if you wanted to apt-get or yum install the software. So here's some of the goals. Includes installation, backup, restore, monitoring. There's a bunch of tools that are built into it, shell tools that allow you to very quickly create an OpenVista instance. It would be compatible with other Vistas. Anyone that wants to adapt is, of course, welcome to do that. There's nothing very special. There's nothing OpenVista specific about it. That just happens to be the distribution we work against. I just mentioned to Bhaskar very briefly this morning, we're actually working now. The next step is automatic setup of replication. So we've got some manual replication going on with OpenVista instances running on GT.M, and the next step will be to build those into all of these scripts so that they'll automatically be able to set up replication amongst the various servers, set up a very robust network of servers. And that's future development. I mentioned replication. We're talking about database encryption, and we are certainly talking about, in general, packaging more components to be directly compatible. OVID is one that's already there. Merc would be the next one. And then lastly, I mentioned the tools. We have some tools that were released. This is one of the widget toolkits that we used on CIS, was released and is used in some other applications, as well as Strongwind, which is a testing suite that we used internally to automate some of the testing of CIS. That's been picked up by Novell, and they use that pretty extensively on some of their projects. So I tried to go quick because I know I started late. Last minute plug here. So again, Andy Pardue and I will be speaking on extending the platform. That'll be focused on OVID technical details as well as FM projection tomorrow morning. I also want to plug Connor's presentation. I don't think he's here yet. Connor Dowling will be talking about semantic web and VistA as a semantic web endpoint. Very interesting technology. I would urge you, if you're interested at that level, to take a look at what the work that he's done. Very compelling. And then I will be doing a Medsphere kind of corporate overview on Friday for those of you that are interested on the business side. Any questions I could answer? I know I went quick. Stunned silence or asleep. I was afraid when originally I thought, I have to follow Phil Longman. I'm not sure that's going to, feels like a setup. And then it was like, I got to follow lunch? That's even worse. I did see I interrupted someone.
Yeah, we talked about what about
I'm sorry, the med. Oh, the med reconciliation. Yes. So we have obviously we have the need to do med reconciliation directly within the client, and that has been added into our client as well as the server pieces, and that's all available as open source. I'm not sure about the implementation details. I believe it's in the meds tab. In fact, it might even say. Go back. I think it might have said where it was. Oop. Meds tab. Yep. Great.
So you're still working with Indian Health Service very strongly. There was a status question at one point about releasing some of the RPMS code.
Yes. So good question. Thank you. I actually have a slide that's in here that I'd love to be able to show you about us releasing the work that's been going on at IHS, but we're just not ready to do that yet based on a number of factors. So Medsphere has two arms. We have a government arm that deals with federal agencies and state agencies, and we have a strong partner in the Indian Health Services that runs a derivative of VistA called RPMS, for those of you that aren't aware. They have a different client software, which they refer to as EHR. One of the long-term goals for us, and I was actually talking a little bit at lunch with a number of folks on this topic, is to converge those products as much as possible. Indian Health Services has done an excellent job of focusing on population health management, chronic disease management, a number of other areas, and Sam can attest to that. And VistA has focused in a different area: hospitals, acute care, some behavioral health. And so ideally, you'd want to bring a system, converge a system as much as possible. And so that's one of our goals. We are currently marching towards all of the necessary meaningful use guidelines and whatnot, and our main platform for that will be the converged product, which will be called CareView. My hope would be to get some sort of beta release of that out into open source in the latter part of this year, but it really is, at this point, just an effort of putting all of the necessary patchwork together to take two streams at one time and put them together. And I'll just, real quick, George, the EHR product, view-centric, for those of you that are aware of the framework underlying the EHR product in RPMS, I believe is available in FOIA now. I believe you need to make a request for it. That's all I'll say. George, go ahead. CareView will be the client offering. It will run against RPMS, and it will also run against OpenVista, which will be our commercial platform. And it will include as much of the IHS population disease management pieces as we can.
Do you see a growing interest in some of the OVID and non-MOS type development? What is your feeling of the community as a whole?
Yeah, I think, yeah, sure. This question from Dave was, what's my sense on the growth in OVID-based development and the feeling from a community standpoint around that development? I think there's folks out there that are working in different directions. We have seen and witnessed some of the examples, some community development go on around OVID. Some of it's been very foundational, which I think is to be expected when you release this kind of a technology. It's a very deep technology. It's in the weeds. And so it takes time to build up to the layer where you actually have applications being built on it. But I think it's key to understanding that we as a community need to broaden our acceptance of contributors. Not everyone that comes to our community is going to be willing to take up the MUMPS standard and carry the MUMPS flag. And there's nothing wrong with MUMPS technology, but we surely should increase our pool of potential contributors. And that's what OVID does. OVID provide, among other technologies, OVID is not the only one, but OVID is a way to extend the platform using a different technology, but still maintain the core good that is in VistA that, of course, the VA uses on a daily basis at 1,300 facilities.
Going back to Fairview for a moment, are there any implications, licensing, training, transition models for some of those using or will be using CIS?
No licensing. I mean, the licensure would match almost exactly to what we currently have. CIS is a little bit more monolithic than Ucentric is, so there's some nuances in what will be LGPL'd versus AGPL'd, but I don't think that really is the core of your question. The licensure will be the same. From an open source perspective, the expectation is to be able to download it. It doesn't have the same internationalization cross-platform advantages that CIS does, but on the other side, it has more configurable workflow and some other advantages that the IHS has built over the years. So we just looked at it from a functionality standpoint and said, this makes more sense from what the market is interested in. And of course, all of our customers will be taking it as a part of meaningful use. So we have a 12-month plan to get them there by July 1st, as soon as the government figures out exactly what it is they want us to do. Yes, Sam.
I thought Medsphere was tasked with releasing the RPMS itself. Is that happening anytime soon?
So Sam's question. Yes. So Sam's question is in terms of an RPMS/EHR, because you want both together, release, including ViewCentric, which is the underlying technology that allows EHR to run, has that been released by Medsphere? No, but what we've done is provided all of the source code and software as a part of the task order that Sam's referring to IHS. IHS is the releasee of that. You need to make a FOIA request to IHS, and I believe they will provide it to you. We've provided ViewCentric. Basically, for those of you that aren't aware, Medsphere for a long time owned one slice of that, very small slice of that. We've provided that under an open source license to IHS, and they are allowed to release that. Okay. Everyone's asleep or exhausted? Uh-huh. Yes, I'm nodding my head yes. My understanding is you make a FOIA request, I made a FOIA request, I got something. You make a FOIA request, you'll get something. Let me add, it was a recent request, Sam. So I would try again. Yeah. Yeah, I mean that is the goal of they are the ones releasing it though, and I believe that it's currently being implemented by non-Medsphere folks in Hawaii right now. So, okay. All right. Thanks, everyone.